noting that we're at different places in the province, but I just want to have you remember and consider the many generations of people who have cared for the land before there was any settlement here, before visitors to the continent, and since visitors to the continent. (203), and we have over 70. We've got 71. Yahoo! We have a lot of people who are going to are here to listen to you, John and Anne, and just really excited that you're able to join us today. I'm going to open with a poem, or it's actually a prayer about the elements from somebody named John Lame Deer, who's obviously an Indigenous person, but I don't know from where. I will read it and invite you to be comfortable where you are, and invite you to take about 3 big breaths. Listen to the air. You can hear it, feel it, smell it, taste it. Woniya Wakan, the holy air, which renews all by its breath. Spirit of life, spirit, life, breath, renewal. It means all that, Woniya Wakan. We sit together. Don't touch, but something is there. We feel it between us as a presence. A good way to start thinking about nature. Talk about it. Rather, talk to it. Talk to the rivers, to the lakes, to the winds, as to our relatives. May it be. Welcome, all you sojourners in this internet place, this virtual space where we meet together. I'm happy today to greet you all. I don't know, I keep forgetting to say who I am, and you do know who I am. I'm Lee Spice, a Pastoral Relations Minister for Chinook Winds. We have with us our Executive Minister, Trina, and our special guests who are often here with us are John Pentland and Yates Laberge. But I think I'm going to hand this over right now to Trina, who has some announcements to share. Also, I invite you to monitor the chat, keep an eye on the chat. You see that there's a prayer request there for Diane Crew, amongst other things that are showing up there. So I'll hand it over to you, Trina, and I'm turning off my mic now.
Thank you, Lee, and it's so good to see so many of you here, and I'm very grateful to John and Anne for their leadership with us today, because I think the topic is exciting and kind of energizing in this time. I don't know if any of you saw the article that's circulating around on Facebook that says that what we're feeling in this moment is languishing, which I thought was a good definition of how it is for me this week. So I don't know if you've seen it, but it's definitely worth a read. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight. We've got our regional meeting coming up already next week. So I'm trying not to have a heart attack as I speak those words. But we've been busy in the planning of that. And there are just a couple of things that we wanted to flag for you just to make sure that you were aware of. First of all, there will be a region-wide worship service on the Sunday. It'll be live streamed at 10:30 and available for all communities of faith. It'll also be recorded and available on YouTube later, but we're hoping that some of you will choose to join in with that service on Sunday, and that we can worship together as a whole region. And our theme speaker will be preaching at that service. We also have put out a call for nominations. The most important one is that commissioners' nominations have to come into this regional meeting, even though the general council meeting is not happening until 2022. And so we actually need to get those nominations in for this meeting, because we have to provide the names to general council by October. So this is our only opportunity to do this. So we invite you to consider your call as to whether or not you might be willing to be a representative at General Council. And also, although we are the hosting region, and Sue Broderick is chairing the committee for the General Council, the meeting will be held electronically because of the COVID restrictions. So unfortunately, we won't be gathering in person in Calgary as was our original plan, but we still continue to be the hosts of the meeting, and invite you to consider your call to serve in that role and to get that in as soon as possible. We also have some vacancies on the regional executive, and invite you to consider whether that or not that might be something that you feel called to as well. The regional executive has been focusing in on governance issues, but our goal is to really get those governance policies in place, which are almost done. And we'll be sharing an update about that at the regional meeting, but also to really shift our focus into mission and vision, and kind of how to offer leadership to the region over the long term. And so really encourage you to consider being part of that journey with us. And then Dave Pollard was going to speak a bit about the proposal process. Dave is chairing the business committee for the upcoming regional meeting. Dave, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Thanks, Trina. Oh,
Cutting out a bit.
how's that?
I heard how's that and nothing else. So it depends if you said more than how's that.
Issues here because you.
Nope, you're cutting
Weird.
in and out.
Weird.
Oh, maybe you're in there now.
Now, can you hear me now?
I think so.
Okay. So we have proposals, a couple of them, one to the region, one to general council. If you have a proposal for general council, just like our commissioners, we need to deal with that proposal at this meeting. And so if you are thinking about talking to general council via a proposal, we need to have that back in. There's a jot form that you can put your proposal in, and Mauricio will make sure it goes to the right folks. And if you have proposals of the region, please send those in. This is our time to do our business. As I said, we have two, but we do need to get those in so that we can get them on the docket and figure out how best to deal with them. If you need help and you have a burning question or idea for a proposal and need some help drafting it, please be in touch with me. I'll put my email in the chat and we can make sure that that happens.
Okay, and you're gone again, but I think you said everything that you needed to say there. If there's anything else, you can add it in the chat. And then just the last thing I wanted to say is there'll be some updates and things happening in the next week as we prepare for the meeting. So please just make sure that you add us to your address book so our emails don't go to your spam. So Chinook wins at united-church.ca, and we'll put that in the chat as well. If you add that address into your address book, then we will be less likely to end up in spam or junk. And that's all. I want to reserve as much time as possible for Anne and John. So Anne and John, over to you.
Go.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now? Okay. Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure today to introduce Anne Yates Laberge, who's our executive director at our congregation, and is just a brilliant person and a fun person. And she's going to share some of what she knows about data, which sounds really boring, but it is essential to being a thriving church. And so I kind of encouraged her to put this together, and I'm cheering for her. I want you to see how she usually looks around here. Could you put on your work face, please? This is really how she looks most of the time. So she is, I'm not sure if this helps church growth or not, but anyway, I really want to hand this over to Anne and invite her to share her skill and her passion and her faith with you. So over to you, Anne.
Okay. Hello. John's gonna mute there. Good? Are we good?
Good to go.
All right, I gotta turn my volume up. It's kind of weird to only hear yourself. How are you today? I am gonna share my screen here and we're gonna get going. I'm happy to, actually, before I share my screen, I'm happy to be able to do this. I'm just want to tell you a tiny bit more about myself. I'm the executive director here. I have a computer science degree and a concentration in computer information systems and a degree in psychology also, which makes me an interesting person to be working at a church. But there's a path between computer information systems and psychology that really has a hand in hand with what community means and how you grow churches and how you are the church. So it's landed me here with in an interesting position that a lot of churches don't have, but we're lucky enough for me to have. And one of the things I talked to Trina about and was that I feel really called to share the information that we've collectively figured out with some other churches that they may benefit from it. I think it's really important for churches to share with one another, to learn from one another, and essentially grow from one another. So I just wanted to be clear with you why I was sharing, and for you to understand that this is part of a scalable solution. So the solution that I'm going to, or sort of the solution that I'm going to offer you, is not something that you only can do if you're a larger church or a smaller church. It's meant to apply to all levels of church life, so that you have the opportunity to feel like it's something that you could use. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen now. Oops, didn't want to do that. Hold on. Where's the play? Here we go.
I think I should pop over.
Okay, we're good? Okay, so the purpose of church, I think it's kind of funny, this slide title being the data nerd, who's actually the purpose of church, which is an interesting thing to say. But we have two goals that I really have put forth with this, is that if I think of all that I'm doing, it's to help people grow spiritually and be part of a community. That's what it comes down to in my tiny little world, is if I make all the decisions I make and how I frame them and everything else, is like, well, am I making that decision to help grow spiritually and for be a part of community? So that's where I come at most of my work. So I'm going to have John talk a little bit, and it's actually just easier for him to pop over here. Can you see? I don't know. Can you see him now? Okay.
Okay, and we've been a cohort since last February, so not
It's way too long.
Way too long.
Yeah.
That's why she needs a psychology degree. Okay, so one of the things I'm really clear about as I think about reflections on growth and communities is to think about our churches having sort of three concentric circles. The center is what you would call your committed people. They're the people that are there through thick and thin. They've been there a long time. Generally, there are plus and minuses to committed people. Sometimes they're committed negatively, which means they're most interested in the carpet rather than the gospel, perhaps. But that's the center core. Then there's, in every church, the comfortable people who know that churches go through good times and bad times, and they go with the flow, if you will, with the community. Those are really important people in your church. And the outer, wider circle is called the curious circle. And from my experience of church growth, whether it's in a rural area or a large urban center, is that paying attention to the curious people is how churches grow. The curious people have great questions. They're unafraid to ask them. They offer perspective to the other levels or circles within the church. And this church growth that we're going to talk about in the next 40 minutes is really about paying attention to the curious and using data to help you understand who the curious people are, either in your church or near your church that might be looking for a church. And so these three circles are essential to understanding how churches grow. And in particular, I think Jesus was comfortable with all three circles. You need all three circles, but he paid particular attention to the curious, which I think is a faithful approach to growing your church. So it's looking at curious data.
Okay. Thanks, John. So next thing I want to talk about is we have an interesting thing that I figured out while we were going through this, is that in the pandemic, before the pandemic, we were all sitting next to each other comfortably, really close to each other, but technology was really what happened just in the office. It wasn't affecting every single part of every part of our church. Right now, the opportunity that we have is taking the data that is in front of us and using it. But we have an age-old question of what is church growth, and more importantly, what is church decline? And what I'm doing is saying, okay, well, this level of, I'm getting someone talking or feedback. I'm not sure what's going on. Could somebody mute them? Okay. The problem that we have with church decline is that a lot of times people come in and out of our doors and we actually don't know who they are. Well, interesting, during the pandemic, as we're connected electronically with every single aspect of our church, there's a data trail no matter what. It's either a name on a screen or it's a, hi, my name is Joe, or whatever. But basically there's data that can be collected from all of those aspects of interactivity, which is something that we really need to pay attention to during the pandemic. And it's something that as soon as the pandemic's over or over-ish, then we're going to lose sight of. So we need to actually pay attention right now as to who's amongst us and what the activities they're doing, so that we can actually understand how to engage people at a deeper level. So I just want to explain what data is not. Data is not your gut. Data is not what's always been, and it's not your hope for the future, and it's not what Sally says, and it's not what Bob says, but it's actually data. It's actually things that are black and white. They're binary. They're ones and zeros. They're things that you can count. They're a part of some subset of thing, but they're not your feelings. And a lot of times in churches, we really have talked about what data is in terms, and we made a lot of decisions on our gut feelings. So just going to say that. There's two types of data. One type is internal and the other one is external. Today, the internal data that we have is our attendance, our contribution reports, surveys, registrations, congregational care requests, prayer requests. Everybody has all these things, so they're not new. We have external data, which is Google Analytics, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Zoom, things like that. This is out of our scope today. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we're not talking about external data as part of this. We're talking about internal data. It's stuff that you already have. We're going to talk about a little bit more how to use it and to help you out a little bit more. So basically, if you look at all these little clipboards, you can have a clipboard of your attendance and a clipboard of your givings. You can have a clipboard of maybe over here of your congregational care requests. What happens is all those clipboards usually stay separately, okay? And we don't take all of those things together and make them into something that we can actually use to help us grow. It's the interactivity between those clipboards that matter. So when I in the technical terms, because there are people like having a query to say, tell me who's new. Well, how do we know they're new? Well, because they haven't showed up on our records before. What records? Well, the records that we kept all along. Oh, we don't have those records. Okay, so let's start those records today, so that way we know who's new. And then we have to think about, okay, who's made a donation? Is this their first donation? I don't know. We should know who's the first donation because we have an action that we need after that. And who's stopped donating. There's all these different things. So all of these are like what they can tell us in church world, which is a really important piece. But how? This is a really big one. So I really want to take this all the way to, oh, hold on, I think it missed one. Yeah, okay, why? Why should we use data? So the idea here is that you're going to actually use data to help you make decisions rather than using your gut. And actually help you realize changes, realize movements, realize that you are making some great decisions. But without data, you're not able to realize those decisions unless someone says, hey, I think this happened, or I think that happened. You can really reach your goals, your church goals, by actually looking at the data, collecting the data, and analyzing the data. So now we get about how. So the idea here is that I'm going to present you a couple of scenarios, and they're based on some principles that we came up as a church, and we said, okay, what are our main goals here? We wanted to have more people involved in groups. We wanted to have more people sign up for PAR, and we wanted to grow our membership base. So with those three goals in mind, I'm going to give you a couple of examples that I'm talking about. Some of these examples may not be relatable to you as a church, but I tried to pick ones that are like as wide a scope as I could to make it seem that's as good as we could for you guys. So the other piece that I really have to talk about is that when you're talking about data, we're talking about collecting data and using data, you need to have everybody on board. That includes all your staff, all your small ministry leads, all your key volunteers, to understand why are we taking attendance? Why are we running reports? Why do we care? So you really have to understand why, as a church, you're a big church, to say, we want to be able to do this thing. And that thing is going to require us to know this amount of information. And how we get that information is from doing these things. So but everybody has to be on the same page for you to get there and for you to get there successfully. You can't have someone saying, well, I saw that Netflix thing about the data, and this was a really scary show, and we don't want to be the church that keeps creeping on everybody's information. What we're talking about is understanding what already is and what's happening inside of your building, and just actually making note of it rather than ignoring it. So that's a really thing, but you need to have everybody invested. So I want to tell you about what happened was when someone comes in our church, well, right now it comes in our website, we want to know who they are and understand exactly what they're about. And what happens there is that when they're new, hold on a second. This thing's in the wrong order, but when they're new, we actually have a form that they fill out and says, hi, I'm new. Well, then we have at the other end of that form, our most engaged, friendly person ever. Now, you can call this at the normal church, Sally. Sally stands at the door. Sally knows everybody in that church. She knows who's new. She knows who, so basically you need Sally on the other end of this form, because she needs to know, and she needs to be almost like your nosiest person. Tell me more about this. Tell me more about that. You really need that person who really wants to know more about people. But more than importantly, the person who's going to receive this note is the person who understands your church as a whole, and understands your ministries, and understands your purpose, and can answer all these questions, and also can say, I want you to join this group or that group because I think you'll enjoy it. But it's basically your Sally, it's your Sally form, that right now in the digital age, which we are right now, you can have a Sally. So if you see that someone's on your Zoom call that you've never seen before, or see someone in your chat that you've never seen before, like when you're doing a live broadcast, you say, hey, let's get to know each other. Would you mind filling out this form so I can get you a little bit more involved in something other than Sunday morning? So what we're talking about is being involved in a deeper, more meaningful way at the church. So that's, and that goes back to growing deeper spiritually and being part of a community. If you think of those two goals that I talked about at the beginning, this goes hand in hand with how do we grow people spiritually? How do we get them involved in a community? So with that being said, the whole purpose of the I'm new form is to be able to begin that conversation. And then that person knows from that point on, they have a person's, we actually had Sarah, our communications person, be the receiver of that as we were building this out. But she knows all of our ministry. She knows all these things. And it actually, so this lovely story with this new person is that they came and they said, I'm new. Within 6 months, they were involved in 2 ministries. They joined our membership class. And now, just recently, has offered to help with an addictions workshop we're doing a new mental health focus here at Hillhurst, and now offering to lead one of the seminars. And that's a 6-month process that just happened from that form of I'm new and saying, do you see me? So our process here is called I see you. It's a process that we've internally named. So meaning I see you. I mean, not at the hospital, but I see you. So anyway, so it's a process, but where we're saying we don't want to ever not see someone, and not seeing someone is the biggest error that we could ever make. So that's what we're doing here. So then the other example that was really it's been a home run hit is that, and I'm sure all of you did calls during COVID. Everybody did calls because that's what we could do, right? Well, before COVID, we didn't really have the ability to know who was amongst us on a Sunday morning because we didn't take attendance, other than the people that they gave contributions, because we have their phone numbers, we have their addresses, we have all that stuff. But if you had, if you had someone just coming on a regular basis and hadn't really given you their information, and this happened a lot at Hillhurst, where if they didn't contribute to the church financially, we didn't know who they were. Well, we turned that upside down and we said, okay, these COVID call lists are from people that we need to understand who's amongst us. We really need to get that, because we have a Facebook group called The Hub. And what happened is that there were a couple of people on our morning meditation that didn't get calls. And they weren't contributors to the church, but they were really upset because they had actually been going to this ministry for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it was, through this really difficult time. So anyway, I said to each of the ministry leads, I said, I need your attendance in right now. So we turned it around and got all the attendance in, and we called another 185 people. We had 185 people amongst us that we didn't know. Well, we did know, but I didn't really know at that point that we needed to connect with. That 185 calls were the most valuable calls that we ever made in COVID. They're the people that we called and we said, hi, Bob, it's so-and-so from the church. Hi, oh, hi. And the first question is, how are you? What can we do for you? Now, they haven't given us a penny. They're not a regular giver. They're not, there's a relationship here that they have with us, but we needed to reciprocate that relationship with them. And that's a really critical piece here, is seeing people without being a giver and seeing people without being a donor is really critical. Because there's people that are going to give time and talents and treasure. They're going to give you their treasure, but their time and their talents, or they're just going to give you their time, which is watching you on Sunday mornings, which is a really important part of all this, or an email to you. But to this point, churches have only been tracking people who are giving donations for the most part. I'm talking really general terms here. So anyway, from that call list, we actually, the relationship with our congregation deepened in a very meaningful way from that point on, where we saw people for the first time, or they understood that we saw them for the first time. And that was magical on every level. We said, are you watching on Sundays? So we actually turned it into 2 parts. One is I see you. Second is, we're doing church and we've never done it this way. Can you tell me how we're doing? Can you tell me what you'd change? Can you tell me how I can actually help you get more involved? And they're the ones like, I can't work my iPad and things like that. So we set up little tech teams to help out with those sorts of things. So we were all in this new basket, but basically we used these calls to expand the calls, but it was only with data that we were able to actually understand who's amongst us. And the next example I want to give you is how you invite people. And I know that everybody has arguments around what gets announced on Sunday morning. It is literally the age-old, nope, that's too many announcements. That's not enough announcements. And the announcement, thing goes on and on and on. one of the things that's really important is when you announce things to the congregation, you're splattering it just on the wall, just to the wall, but you don't know who's going to catch it, right? Well, we had a congregational meeting that was really important. We were trying to decide if we're going to do a renovation at the church or not. Big questions, right? Well, we had a couple congregation meetings before, but at this one's particularly like, oh, it's another congregational meeting. I don't want to go to the congregational meeting. That we only had 30 people signed up. So I said, okay, let me do this. So I pulled the data in from all the people who had gone to our congregational meetings that we had attendance for the last 4 times we had congregational meetings. Then I pulled in everybody who had given a donation to the church in the last year and a half in. And with our software, you're able to say, dear Bob, or whatever their name is, dear first name, and say, I noticed you haven't signed up for the congregational care meeting or congregational meeting yet. I'd really like you to be there. We're discussing some important stuff. Here's the link. I hope to see you, Anne. Hope to see you there, Anne. Well, it was a little sly because they thought that I wrote to them by myself, and they're like, oh, hey, Anne, I'm actually going to be doing this and that. And so they actually didn't know that was a form mail, which felt a little bit bad about afterwards because they really did think that I thought that, because it was so informal. But at the same time, what's more important is they knew that I saw that they weren't there. And that's part of the relationship. That's part of, like, if you're not showing up, and you should be showing up specifically for church things, we want to know that now all these things can happen with pencil and paper and Excel sheets or, those sorts of things. They don't have to happen with fancy databases. I'm just saying that our invitations matter, and our invitations for things that we think that people really should be at and involved in matter. And we want to take note of those things. We want to make sure that people understand that we want them to be there. And that's just the piece of this. So data can help you with that engagement piece that's really critical for people to understand that they matter to the church.
So how many came to the meeting?
So we had 200 people in the very end that showed up for that meeting. 200 people. So that was basically our home run of data. If you if you think about it, we got to vote on how bad John's beard was. 50% of the people said that he should keep it, and I did not agree with that. So anyway, maybe we should take another poll. Anyway, so that was really direct invitations work, and that data really helps you with that piece, is to be able to say, I really want you around, and I see that you're not here. One of the things that we do on a monthly basis too is we run donation reports, and this is actually not new information, but the information is that who's a new donor and how do we thank them, and how do we thank them in a really swift manner, and then also if someone's going off par, which is or par regular givings, one thing that we need to say is, how can I help you? Do you have a congregational care that needs to be met? Have you lost a job? Those sorts of things. So we have to understand that people going off par doesn't always mean that, they don't like the church anymore. More than likely, there's something else going on, and it's okay to call and say, hey, how are you? Just how are you? And more than likely, they'll say, I've got this or that going on. And we say, how do we care for you in a more meaningful way? And a lot of times those calls are passed on to congregational care. So there's lots of things that you can find out. So every action, if you are brave enough to have a reaction, usually results in something good. And that's the part that we have to really remember. So if something happens, like a bounced email because they changed your email address. Well, if you change your email address, sometimes that means that you've gotten divorced and you've left the home. Sometimes it means you moved. Okay, well, that's a point of interaction for us to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, your email bounced. Are you guys okay? I just want to make sure it's good. And it's just so simple little acts of data that allow us to be able to engage in a more meaningful way. And then we found quickly during COVID that the needs of our congregation far outweighed our ability to take care of our congregation. So we had to make a very sudden shift with how we were doing congregational care, meaning we moved it onto an automated system, and I created a system with data to be able to get out care faster. And everything is centralized in this database. So all of the notes and updates and things like that are centralized so that we can care for people in a more meaningful way. And the other piece is that when we've taken into consideration is that one piece of data that comes in is a prayer request. And that prayer request doesn't sometimes it comes in as they think as a prayer request, but we need to look at those and say, okay, if I want to help people grow spiritually and be a part of a community, sometimes that prayer request needs to turn into a congregational care, fulfilling a congregational care need. So we do that too, and all of it's centralized so that you can see it. So this is really when I go back to the I'm new form, this is really how it works out, is I'm new, and then this little star is where the magic happens. And then this is the engagement person, this is Sally. And then this is where all these things can go to. So it was just actually a little slide out of order there, but anyway, that's the cute little picture we made for that. I had a problem changing these, John. Okay. There, let's go crazy. So this is just the idea of the form that we have is just a simple form, but it's how long you've been coming here and things like that. And then there's a whole scripting that comes along with it. And then the biggest picture of all is that why we're using data. It's to form relationships. We need to ask things directly, and the data allows us to see people at church a whole lot more. The last thought is really important, is that this is a process that takes time. This isn't like you're not going to roll this out like tomorrow or the next day. It's a bigger picture than that. And it goes all the way back to the goals of, do you want to grow? Is your church in a growth mode, or does it want to grow? You have to answer those questions first. Or do you care deeper for the people around you? That could be that. So with that, you have to go all the way up to the top and say, what are our goals as a church? And let those goals guide you for where you're going, versus it being, I'm going to do an new form. Okay, well, do you have the proper people in place to be able to make that happen, to make yourselves be able to engage with those in a proper way? Because you don't want to put an I'm new form out there and no one ever even respond to it. That would be a pretty yucky situation. And then you can do this with technology, but you can also do this without technology. You can do this, but it means that you're focusing on becoming a church that's aware of what's happening around itself a little bit more. And then paying attention around if you pay attention to the people around you, you will grow. You just have to pay attention more. Because you listened this long, we've actually created a resource page for you. So if you go to hillhurstunited.com/resources, we've done a brain dump there of all I've told you, and actually a whole lot more. So I'm thanking Sarah, communications lead, for creating this page. It's a page that it really has helped us, all the resources we use, plus this I'm new form, we have a full script on, and sort of like how people go back and forth and things like that. So that'll be there also, so that you have resources with this. A lot of this comes down to communication and how we're going forward with that. So, and questions? Can I just close this?
You want to ask what questions emerged and what I said?
Okay, so what questions have emerged with you during this, and why?
Because you have lots of time.
We have lots of time.
So does anybody have some questions? And if you do, you can raise your hand or type them in the chat, or just unmute yourself and ask.
I have a question. It's Cecilia from Lakeview United Church. And,
Go ahead, Cecilia.
Okay, good. You can hear me. I'm just wondering, what database programs do you recommend? Because you were mentioning you need to use technology for this. So is there a database program you recommend?
Yeah, I think a lot of churches are on Power Church. We use Planning Center Online, and there's a link to it from that resources page. There's several really good examples of different. There's probably over 100 of decent church management systems. We chose Planning Center because its ability to create lists or queries,
Okay.
and custom fields. So it's really important. And if you get into it, the actual base part, which is people database, that's free, completely free. But it has components in it for giving, for events, for scheduling, for volunteering. It's a whole huge package.
Oh, wow.
what we found is that the really important part of this is that the administrative needs on all of our ministries decreased probably about 60 or 70%. So what you're doing by hand with is like, hey, can you do this for me? And can you do that for me? And I'll tell you more details about this and that. Everything's centralized. So that was a critical piece with money savings. Now, you pay for the service, but that's a flat rate. When you're paying for people to do these tasks that can be automated, it's really important that you're working smart, not hard. So that's what we found.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Anne.
Mhm.
And how do you manage the security of your contact lists? Is it secured just for staff members? How are things secured in terms of data?
Yeah, it's a high level of permission base. So we have administrators, managers, and viewers. There's only two like I'm the, I guess, grand poobah of the whole thing, and I have basically rights to every single page. The only person that have rights to our givings module is our bookkeeper. People, it's not even all of our staff, it's the staff that need it. And we actually, it has an app on the phone also. So like John can actually look up people data. So if he needs to call someone, but we don't give John access to be able to modify data just in case. We just don't want him to touch a lot of things. So we don't let him go. We don't let him touch all the buttons. So we have different permissions based upon the needs. We actually have 3 high-level volunteers who actually have more administrative access than our regular staff members do. But it is very highly secure. It's not password based. It's based on the SMS code system. So when you sign in for the first time, you actually have to have a code sent to your phone, and that does the system. So someone can't break into it with a password that's been stolen off the internet, which is really important.
And there's
the second part of but let me say one more thing about the second part of that security piece. Because the givings module is on there, there's a CRA requirement that we restore the data locally in Canada. So once a year, that data is actually brought down to our server here in the building and stored for archive purposes. So just to let you know that there is a CRA requirement around givings, that you do need to store your data in Canada at some point. So we choose to do it once a year in Canada.
Thanks, Anne. There's also a question in the chat. If you could say more about the system that responds to prayer requests.
So it's within the Planning Center, but basically we have a form, just like the form that you saw there, and it says, "Give me, tell me your prayer." That is automatically sent to our Congregational Care team leads. Within that, there's a thing called the workflow within our database that actually says, okay, what are the needs of this person? And they can communicate with the person directly back and forth. Once those needs are sent off to either we have a prayer shawl team, we have it's called food hugs or meal team. Those are also automated, sent off to different teams. Once those are done, people say step complete, and it basically closes out. I feel like it's a ticket system of sort, but basically it closes out the ticket. Then we have the ability to do a list a month later, which our student minister is starting to work on, was basically follow up on those prayer requests to say, okay, you received congregational care 1 month ago. How are you? So we're being intentional about the follow-up now, which is something that we hadn't been doing in the past, but because of the data, we're able to know how are we caring for people at a more meaningful way, even beyond their initial request. So that piece is really important also. Did I answer that question okay?
Mhm.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Know about the money, if you want to put in a special code, like you can break down the groups. Is that helpful?
So what?
How you break down the groups?
While they're talking about that, do you have any other questions? You can get those ready here. And did you want to say something?
Yeah, John, I do a lot of work with givings in general, just in givings, and a lot of analysis on givings, because offline, we understand we had lots of people on par. The number of people that came to church on a Sunday compared to the number of people who are was just not anywhere near that, right? So it's important to understand that when we're going through givings, that we are stewards, and understand that stewardship, as it's changed over to COVID, we had to connect with the people that were not, that had like just given checks in the plate before and things like that. And we had to find a way to do that. So we had lists upon lists, but we had to analyze all those lists together. And the other thing that we learned about givings is that there are a lot of people that, well, quite a few people that were on par or gave regularly, but actually weren't members of our church. And there's data to suggest, and this was a really important thing for me to learn, there's data to suggest that the people that are the most involved in the church stay in the church, and they give to the church more often. And they understand sometimes when they become involved, they give more because they understand the needs of the church in a more meaningful way. So we had about half of the people on par were not actually members of our church. And I found that just mind-boggling. So anyway, so our last congregational membership class that we just had during COVID, I said, you know what, dear Bob, I love using the word Bob, I use it a lot, dear Bob, I noticed that you are a regular contributor to the church, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I want to let you know that we're having a membership class, and I'd really love to see you sign up for that membership class, because what it says to me is that this is your church, and I want to know that we have a reciprocal relationship here. And it was a very real email. So with that, 30 people signed up for our membership class that were already on par, they're already giving, already part of the church, but they were able to understand membership is a different relationship level to us. And we were able to give them a little bit more history. And we wouldn't have had that opportunity before, because membership class is different than any other sort of medium that we deliver. So they understood things about the history of the church, what our goals were, all sorts of different things. The other piece of that is that some of those people were actually members still at other churches, and they're like, I tried to request their membership, and they're like, we don't even have the records anymore because it's so old. So they had already been here forever and ever and ever. They just hadn't transferred. So that two groups of people altogether, it was about 50 people that joined our church during COVID because we asked them. We did a direct ask to say, hey, you want to be a member of Hillhurst United Church? You're already here. We know you're already here. One of the people had a really great question. Why do I want to be? Why? It's just paper. And I said, you're right. It's just paper. But at the end of the day, it's important for us to know that the people that are giving to our church regularly, we're able to have them understand that they're an important part of the United Church of Canada, and the United Church of Canada knows who they are, because I think that's really important to know. And it always goes back to that who are the people amongst us, who are the people in your neighborhood, sort of all the way back to Sesame Street. So.
And the Holy Spirit too.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Questions in the chat.
Do some of you have experiences about growth or in during the pandemic, or the ways that you can connect with people?
I think I'd like to ask too, is that what's the most frustrating part of data right now with you? Is it the systems? Is it the bigness of it? Is it the, what is frustrating about all the technology around with churches that makes it unattainable or non-reachable, or do you feel? What's holding you up?
Some of the stuff at the church I work at, McKillop United, just hasn't been updated in so long that sometimes when we do reach out to people on our directory, the information is too out of date to be effective. And so that's been the most frustrating thing for me.
Yeah. So you have the biggest opportunity in front of you on that one. That's like a gold mine of an opportunity, because more than likely one of those pieces of data might be correct, whether it be their address or whether it be their phone number, or whether it be that you know their name and you have someone, say, I think they're on Facebook. Let me shoot them over to messages and say, hey, I know you're going to church here, but I don't have the correct information for you. So those are points of engagement that you could actually take under your wing and really, really make something magical about it, to say, we're updating our data and I can't get in touch with you, and I really want to make sure that I'm able to care for you during this time. So that's an opportunity sit in front of you.
Thank you for that perspective. That's super helpful.
John, I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on, like, you know, you did ministry before you had this kind of process, and ministry after with this new information and data. How has it kind of changed things for you as a leader?
Okay, I'm gonna mute.
You're muted, John.
First off, I would say every church needs an to have, and there are Anns in your church who are able to provide this skill and gift. So Ann's data geek stuff is brilliant because she can translate numbers into some of the approaches to ministry. So together it works really well. I think what it's really helped us do is feel like, you know, COVID is so hard on all of us. It's languishing, yes, between depression and exhilaration. It's the hardest work I've ever worked in 30 years, maybe not the smartest. And so this has helped us try to figure out how to work smartly, because it's very difficult to lead worship staring at a camera. It's very difficult to do ministry when you're not bumping into people talking about what's going on in their life. And so this is an intentional way of giving a little bit of relief to leadership to know, okay, we are connecting. And for congregants, I think they are surprised, amazed, delighted that we notice, that they see you, I see you, and that they know that they are valued and invited to be part of things, which we forget. One of the things we're discovering during this time is there are many different connection points in this church 7 days a week, whether it's 7 in the morning or book study at noon or whatever. But the connection for clergy, I think, I would say, to see people's faces online like we are right now reminds us we're not alone in this, reminds us that we can actually be very intimate. I have many conversations where people are moved to tears of joy and or sorrow. And so that it builds a connection. And I guess I would say that this is really hard work we're doing right now for all of us. And we fail lots, we make mistakes, it can be challenging and depressing. But this data gives us a bit of a boost to say, okay, we are making a difference in one person's life, or we included one more person in this community. And the information around growth is not numeric as much as it is knowing, as Ann said, growing spiritually and connecting to a community. And during this pandemic, people are feeling isolated and alone. And if they can connect to us throughout the week, many will say it's helping their mental health and their spiritual life. So the data really matters. I don't even get it, but I trust that someone does, and that's Ann and the people that work with her. And I guess why I wanted people to hear from her is that this is so important for the life of our work, in particular during the pandemic, when we are trying to make as many meaningful connections as we can. So I encourage you to steal. We steal, beg, borrow from all kinds of places, and encourage you to come to our website and take whatever Ann and Sarah put together, because it's very good. And it's all meant to encourage all of us to grow to the best of our abilities wherever we are.
Well, on that note, thank you. Lee, I think you had a few concluding things you wanted to raise.
Sure. First, I wanted to thank both of you for the work that you have done and the work that your community has done, and thank you for your generosity in sharing it with us. I see two areas of work, you know, where figuring out how to gather data is one thing, but also knowing that a lot of folks already have data, and being able to employ that, use it, and remember to go back to our goals of who we are about being church. And I appreciate that so much about what you've shared. So thank you for your generosity. I I have a couple of announcements. The first is that we have a position that has been posted at the regional office. It is for a half-time administrative assistant. Where did I think Shelley just posted it there. Okay, right on cue. Thanks, Shelley. So there, if you know somebody who might be interested in working part-time, doing the administrative assistant work, then please have them, or you, if you want, check that out, please. The other thing is we heard about our regional gathering. After the regional gathering, then the week after, we're starting a new little project in unifying body, mind, and spirit. We're starting a project called Stroll for Your Soul. It is kind of it is a walking challenge. Every morning, once you sign up, every morning you'll be getting a kind of a meditative message that you can take with you on your walk, and you can report to us how far you have strolled or perhaps rolled. Then we're going to walk in and around various places in Canada. And that is, if you want to get your church together and have a group that does it, get your folks to do it wherever they are, clergy, lay people, and anybody who wants to join in. It's just a fun way of nurturing each other, I think. So those are my two messages. Trina, was there anything else that you? Oh, there's a question in the chat for.
So the question is about the affirming ministry, and so the affirming ministry will be leading us through some learning in the regional meeting, but we will not be doing a vote because we are feeling like we haven't quite done all the pre-work that we need to do to be ready for that vote. So we'll be continuing the conversations over the next year, and we'll be looking to have a vote at our meeting in the following year. And hopefully when we'll be in person and able to really celebrate this great decision one way or the other. Yeah.
Well, we approach the top of the hour. I'm wondering if there is somebody among us who would leave us with a blessing and a prayer.
I've already talked, but I can do it if you want.
Sure, John, that would be lovely.
I first invite you to scroll through and take a look at the faces on the screen here. These are our colleagues and friends who are doing their very best in difficult days. This is lonely, hard, challenging work. And yet we have been entrusted with the gift of the church to be a community that deepens our spiritual life and connection to the Creator and to one another. And so the names and faces on the screen matter deeply. Let us pray. Spirit, we give thanks for the mystery and wonder of technology, that we can zoom into one another's offices and homes and kitchen tables and learn together and share our questions, share our answers as we seek to thrive and grow in our faith. We hold those who are ill of body, mind, or spirit into your care this day, particularly those who work in vulnerable situations. Hold us and abide with us as we journey. We give thanks for this day and all that we have brought to it. May the questions continue as we seek to be faithful to you and one another. In gratitude, we pray this day. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much.